Hi, my name is Max, and I love you. Let's get into it. I really hate that I feel like I have to be doing this, like amidst the slog of social media, constantly grabbing for your phone no matter where you are, thinking about your Instagram, whatever. I don't know. Not everyone gets it to the same extent, but I've had it like that for a couple of years, and it's really bothered me. But I don't really know how else to approach what I'm going through mentally right now. So even though I hate social media and the addiction culture that it represents, I am going to start making these videos because I, like many people that I hear on apps and talk to in my everyday life, have expressed frustration, being trapped by what can only be described as complacency, because we try small actions of resistance that don't end up being as effective as bigger actions will be if we can find it within ourselves to come together. I'm here to tell you that you have the power. You do have the power. Everyone does. It rests within the home, in the mind, in the body, in the spirit. Everyone has the power to affect change because everyone within themselves is embodied by their condition. You as much as you are within yourself, so you are outside. And what's happening outside of you is within your control as much as you want it to be. You have to grasp onto that. You have to realize that, because once you start to access your own power, you can spread that out into your community, and everyone can become driven by the ability to enact change. I think a lot of people's immediate reaction to a face like mine, like a white male face in the American landscape, is probably going to be any messaging about accessing your power comes from a place of privilege and not lived experience. And I can attest to the fact that I have had somewhat of a privileged life. But right now, what I'm trying to do is empower myself and give that away to people to understand that within themselves, they can create change. They can access a sort of radicalism that contributes to stopping oppression in the system. And that is radicalism now. Today, that is a radical position to want to stop this machine from taking control over every facet of our lives. And when I say it's radical, what I mean is it participates in a revolutionary notion. We are now acting counter to the machine of our governance. We are now saying that we put in place something that's maintaining a corrupt and unequitable system, and it's going to create further inequities and further pain and further suffering for greater and greater amounts of people if we don't do something to stop it. That is radical, because that is revolutionary. In the midst of a revolution, it's important to hang on to the truth. It's important to care about what's true and to build an ideology that's foundational from the truth. The premise of what you believe is true. It's based on things that you can either prove or have not been disproven, that go with the common discourse of human knowledge, right? You can have your own personal beliefs, but there's also a collection of human knowledge that's based on facts, logic, reasoning, science, data, discovery, right? That proves counter to common belief. Just because something is held as a common belief doesn't mean that it's automatically true. It has to be verifiable through other means. And one of the things that I know to be true about human beings is that we do yearn for knowledge. We want to know about stuff. Sometimes, though, in our path, we're misguided by biases that make us believe things that actually aren't true because we want to believe them. And also, there's something else happening, especially today, especially now, which is that there are actors out there that want you to believe things that aren't true so that they can control you. But we're not gonna let it happen. We're not gonna let it happen. We are thought warriors, guarded and guided by the truth. That's the real. That's the real. This is what I have to say about this. I wrote some stuff down because I want to be specific. Now is the time for you to be motivated to know what is true about the world. Do not sit by and watch this time happen. wondering when it's all going to end and how it will end. Now is the time to be motivated to act. To act in whatever way you can, because a great tsunami of change is thundering towards us. And there are no coastlines, there are only vast floodplains where the wreckage will fall. And we must be there, strong, determined, armed with whatever resources we have, ready to build boats and floating cities to weather the storm. I'm here, strong and determined, trying to help people access what is true, using their resources to be able to know what's going on in the world. So, what is going on? We are in the beginning stages of a fascist authoritarian takeover. A lot of people already knew that, but if you didn't, the signs that you can tell are anti-education platforms, attacking public institutions of learning like libraries, making registries for people that are on the spectrum and have other types of what are classified as mental disabilities, but I would push back against that terminology. And forcing the deportation of people that aren't even illegal immigrants, they're U.S. citizens, doing this on a daily basis, everything related to immigration and deportation right now. And create the promise of creating even harder places for these people to survive in El Salvador, a country where many of them have never even been, by the way. And the parallels between that and Nazi Germany using concentration camps in places like Poland are bone-chilling. Oh, and finally, what brings to mind, for me, the biggest first sign is always the attack on queer and trans people. And I know immediately people are going to say that's such a niche issue. It always comes up. Why is that always at the forefront? Well, ask yourself that. Queer identities, two-spirit people that break the gender binary, trans people, people who would have classified themselves as hermaphroditic or transsexual in certain times when those terminologies were in vogue. There's a long history of the gender identity also being a first very telling sign. The gender identity debate and the sexuality identity debate and things surrounding that. In fact, one of the first institutes to be attacked was a research institute in Germany that was the forefront leading thought institute on gender identity and the construction of sexuality through social relations and the construction of gender through social relations. All of that was being researched at this institute. I'm going to look it up so I can get the name right. It was referred to as the Institut für Sexualwissenschaft, or the Institute for Sexual Science. Wissenschaft, I believe, is German for science, or perhaps just Schaft. And it was in Berlin, Germany, and it was attacked on May 6, 1933, right before the takeover of the Nazis on the entire way of life for the German people. These are some of the most disturbing immediate examples that I can think of, and I will spend future videos unpacking these and many, many other examples of the ways in which the Trump administration is actively participating in the open demise of the entire populace of the United States. But right now, I just want to make a call to action video where I can talk about what you can do as a person that's existing in this time. Because guess what? If you ever asked yourself what you would be doing during Nazi Germany, you're doing it right now. At the beginning of the video, I talked about how change and revolution starts in the home, which is inside of you in your body, mind, and spirit. There are weapons, powerful weapons, sheathed within your bodies, minds, and spirits that you can access to combat what is going on today. And these weapons include educating yourself about the truth and implementing what you know in ways that can benefit further your community. And there are 3 topics that I want to talk about in this video related to educating yourself so that you can become someone in your community that is mobilized for resistance, because that's what you have to be right now. You have to be mobilized for resistance. You have to be ready to stand up when people from the authoritarian regime that looms over us. You have to be ready when those people show up and ask you to make choices that go against your moral fortitude. And you have to exercise that fortitude and say, no, this is where I draw the line. This is where it stops. It should, for most people, that moment should have already arrived. When you realized that Trump was going to circumvent the law so that he could deport legal citizens to a country that they've never been to in what is essentially concentration camps, I think that that's maybe the point where you should have looked around and said, this has to stop. And if you're wondering how you can participate, one way is by becoming educated so that you can invest into your community. Because instead of resting in despair where change does not really grow, it doesn't blossom. I mean, it's there. You can yearn for it when you're in active despair. And sometimes active despair can launch you into anger, which can launch you into action. But just to dwell there and to be constantly overwhelmed by the implications of what's happening doesn't seem productive to me. So the first topic that I want to touch on is that through educating ourselves, we can weaponize the mastery of truth and take back what we know to be real about our lives. And this is a concept that I've been working with ever since I studied linguistics at Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. And we really grappled with the idea that our lived reality is founded, and the foundation of our reality rests in the language that we use to perceive it. Really, truly, like the things that we say and claim to be true about our lived experience. This is way too much highlighter, but I've started doing this thing ever since I began participating in Rocky Horror Picture Show. Dream come true. I can't believe I get to be in this musical. But anyway, I've really been thinking about this idea since grad school, that we can shape what we know to be true through the words that attest to what is true. That's how we craft a narrative, and crafting narrative is extremely profound. And that's how the right, by the way, is gaining control of their populace, because they're convincing people that things are true that aren't. Those are actors and agents that want to take a hold of your thoughts so that they can get you to perceive things in a certain way. Today, our access to information is a veritable flood. Everywhere we go, we're being forced to see things on screens and participate with information. Now, it's always been true that human beings pass information in public spaces, but it is happening for like global information and information that's like really related to things that are far out of our reach. And I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't become educated about the world, because I really do believe that you should. But it happens all day, all the time, that we're being bombarded with this stuff. And it has an effect on our mental. Human beings were not meant to process that much information all the time. Freak, way too much undertone highlighter. The red is just gonna come right out. Okay, I have to trust the process, but I really have to do something to reverse what I just did to my face. Can you, oh my gosh, it looks like I got poison ivy rash or something. Oh. I have to go back to the contour. Okay, yeah. We're being bombarded with all this information all the time, whether we want it or not. And on your personal devices, the algorithm mechanisms can curate information that just feeds back into a bias. You get a bias loop. Everyone's living in little truth bubbles that they create for their own selves, but you have to yearn for educating yourself in a way that's deeper than that. You have to trust verifiable sources. You have to do further research and reading to know what's really going on, the scope and the scale of the problems that are facing you in your own communities, because you have to be thinking local. We live in this global world where we're constantly thinking about the implications way far away from us. But right now, we really can't afford to think like that. We have to be more centered around what's going on directly around us, because People in your neighborhoods are suffering from what's happening. You're suffering from what's happening, and you're yearning for someone to be able to relate to you like that. And if you're like me, and now is the time to trust that there are other people in your community that feel the same way, and you guys can mobilize each other through the truth. And in Cincinnati alone, there are homeless shelters, there are free store food banks, and there are 2 education resource centers that sell materials at a discount bulk to teachers. I will link the resource information to all of those places. There's also an environmental action resource. I'll list all of these by name later on in the video, but I'm thinking that if you're thinking about acting locally, you should start volunteering at places that can directly address the problems that are facing us today, because we have to become community-oriented citizens. We can no longer sit inside and wonder what's going to happen next. Change happens from the ground up. Right now, the right is trying to mobilize themselves way from the top and hope that people are just going to fall in line, and you have to resist and say that you would never participate in the lunacy that you see going on around you, where people are getting arrested and put on trial and registered for reasons that seem insane, but this is their system working. Further population control is what they want out of us. And I need to stop using my finger to blend, because that is what's happening to my face. Okay, I think I'm starting to fix the redness issue a little bit. The question always is this wearable out? And for me, it's like usually a yes, even if I look insane, because you gotta show face. Now more than ever must we be girded by the truth, because not everything today that you see is aimed at the truth. The most powerful weapon that a fascist regime has is to inundate the pool of publicly available information with fiction, falsity, and unverifiable information, as much of it as possible. A good example of this is thought-terminating cliches, statements that are used by a motivated base of ideologues. Ideologues being people who want you to believe what they have to say so that they can control you. These thought-terminating cliches are phrases which sound like they are true and that they contain something real within them, like a structured argument, and they sound like they're a resonating statement. Something like pro-life versus pro-choice in the very complex and emotional process of wanting to get abortion care and receive an abortion. That's a good example, because pro-life and pro-choice doesn't really have anything to do with the actual emotional weight behind such a decision. It's just something that people who don't have anything to do with the debate say when they're talking about human lives, so they can reduce it down to a population of people that would choose to end life versus one that wouldn't. Well, what about what happens when the fetus is born and becomes a person and it's left with no resources to survive? And also, just to imply that human life is the same as a fetus at conception raises a whole issue of ideologies that are different from person to person. So these statements reduce the argument down to something that someone can't work with. This whole process describes what Donald Trump's government and anyone who supports him wants you to do. They want you to be controlled by his thought agenda. Excuse me. His supporters will be complicit in the stripping away of their own rights as well as yours. You will be casualties in the war over their own identities, which Trump is waging every single day when he feeds false narratives and does horrific things in the name of some idea, American dream idea, weird thing. I don't have the words for it, because it didn't even really used to exist. When you learn about it in school, you're like, the American dream, but so many people struggled for so long and not everyone made it. Like, what resources do people have to access the American dream? And people say, well, hard work, and that shouldn't be a requirement for someone who works so hard and tries to make it every day in this world and pays taxes to this country and contributes to the economy and the social fabric. Most immigrants are not criminals. In fact, the proportion is lower amongst their population than people who were born in the United States. And this is just another example of what I'm talking about when I say the agenda wants to control you. The supporters of this agenda will be complicit in the stripping away of their own rights because they will believe things like pro-life, illegal immigrant, make America great again, hands off my guns. They will believe these things and they will say these things which are meaningless because they will not do any research, thought, or reflection about what these things mean. The first step in weaponizing the truth so that you can dismantle the narratives of fiction is knowing when a source is legitimate and shines light on the truth versus one which solely exists to get you to follow blindly so that you can be controlled in your every thought and action. Excuse me. Knowing when a source shines a light on what has actually happened or is actually happening is one that attests to the histories of violence, oppression, genocide, and enslavement which our country has exercised and still continues to exercise to this day. It has an effect on the whole human spirit, and the first step in stopping it is recognizing it. But anyway, I digress. The point is that the debates around human lives are becoming sound bites for people that do want you to believe a certain narrative about the United States, our control over the world, our control over our own populace, who deserves to be here and who doesn't. These are questions that are modern fabrications. It's bizarre to me that human beings participate in extended conversations about other human beings being allowed to go to a certain location on Earth. Like, this is planet Earth. Borders are so useful for population control. And I'm not saying that there shouldn't be resistance against social disorder and disarray. Like, it shouldn't just be chaos out there. But certainly what we're doing now is like a form of violence. Europe's a good example of how we can push back against this. The open borders of the member nations of the EU, and Africa also has a model based on this, and I'm sure there's one in South America, but I haven't done a ton of research on that. But basically free movement between countries with like an identification of who you are, where you're from, and where you're going, that seems like a basic way to allow people to just exist on the planet. But we, in the United States, we've created this chaotic emotional response, and it's about people wanting to come here and live here and participate and contribute to the economy. Like, not all Americans want to have kids. Don't you want people to come here and fill that gap? Not all Americans want to take the jobs that immigrants want to do. And also the fear that companies incite around immigrants makes their status here so precarious that they will work for next to nothing. So that also creates a cycle of poverty for people who are just trying to exist. Again, most of them not criminals. So, educate yourself to weaponize the truth so that you can know what's real. The second point that I want to bring up in this video is that through educating ourselves, we can throw off the shackles of ignorance, which devolve us into the chaos of infighting. I've already touched on this, but basically, once you know more about what's real about the world, you become less concerned with the neighbors that don't actually pose a threat to you, and more concerned with the regime that seeks to control every facet of your life, right down to who you can interact with, who's allowed to be in the country for you to interact with, what you're allowed to say, in terms of we're already seeing pushback against free speech and the access of thoughts across like media conversations. We're already seeing restrictions on this by the Trump administration taking out DEI and terms related to queer and trans identity in government and outside of school curricula. And it's pervasive and it's happening now, and you can push back. Your existence is resistance. Your living in the truth is a form of resistance. You can be a person in your community that garners the power of other voices to create a movement that resists, because what's happening right now is a fiction. Authoritarianism is a fiction. We were all born onto this earth, whether we like it or not, and we're allowed to participate freely in the joy, awe, wonder, spectacle, majesty of being alive on this planet. And it's being stripped and taken away from us, and it starts in our brains. We become willful participants when we sign up for these companies, when we buy their products. We're replacing the Amazon with Amazon. We're replacing free thought with AI and Google Power and search engines and computers that it's not even that they're going to control us, they're algorithm machines. Our thoughts are just going to start to become regurgitated. And there's going to be no progress in terms of free thought and the freedom of human autonomy and movement across the planet. But through educating ourselves, we can throw off these shackles. We can become mobilized to form conscious communities of care and empathy for one another. We can, in our immediacy, spread. The effects of this can spread, and we can become people who are thought-motivated leaders in our communities. You can start to volunteer, and when you're volunteering, you can provide a voice of support for people who are in need. You can, if you have the resources, feed people who need to be fed. You can clothe people who need to be clothed. You can house people who need to be housed. The responsibility shouldn't be on the individual, but at this point it is. We need to create these conscious communities of care so that they exist when the worst comes, and people have a place to go where they feel safe and loved, and their only reason is for existence. Because that's the most radical form of self-acceptance and self-care that we can then emanate through our communities, is by allowing people to just merely exist. And I do think that people should contribute and participate to society. I am not someone who's anti the value of hard work to make things better for other people. But the fiction of what we're living under now is that the bottom line of some foreign business body that has huge controls over our salaries and our spending power and our personal economy, that power is starting to overtake us. I mean, there are figures on how private equity firms are buying up private homes. I'm going to get into all these topics in later videos, but right now what I really want to do is empower people to start fighting back against the oppression of the regime, which is carried out through corporate oppression, socioeconomic oppression, and the oppression of physical bodies through deportation and immigration. We have to fight back against this. We have to. So the third point that I wanted to bring up in this video, and I already touched on it, is that after you educate yourself and throw off ignorance to stop infighting, and after you educate yourself so that you can reclaim the truth and use it to vitalize and grab onto what is real and what's happening now, then the third step is that we can begin to weaponize empathy and compassion so that we can mobilize a conscious class of neighbors who care to create resilient communities. Structures of support that gird the walls of our individual, spiritual, mental, and emotional fortresses, readying us to weather the storms of fascist violence when they come, and they will come. They will come to you, and you must learn how to resist through conscious communities of care. I mentioned it already earlier in the video, but the best way that you can reach across the void is by literally reaching across the void, especially if you know that a member of your community is struggling because of their status as a US citizen or as even just like a person who exists. And I'm talking about queer people, I'm talking about people of color, I'm talking about immigrant people dealing with immigrant status and deportation. I'm talking about people who don't fit the narrative of what Trump wants you to believe is an American citizen, whatever that even is, because at this point it seems like he wants a lot of different people to be gone. Okay, what am I doing? This orange looks like maybe a conjunctivitis thing, but it's attached to the purple now. So I have to make a decision. Maybe if I do like a mauve tail. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I love that. It looks like a sunset. That's amazing. Yeah. Once you mobilized in such a way and your community becomes centered inward, compassionate for one another, trying to create change, then we will rally our educated selves around knowing not just what's happening, the truth of it, but also what can we do about it. Join community action groups, become involved with shelters for the poor and unhoused, get to know your neighbors and allow one another to lean when it is necessary. Provide resources such as food, water, and shelter if you can. Basically, think of yourself as someone who gives away what they don't need, because that is what we're really going to need in the upcoming times. Participate in protests and marches, make your voice active out in the community so that people know that we are out here and that we are ready to fight. I love the idea of like war paint and makeup having like this romantic history. Like, there's this whole idea that before battle in ancient Greece and Rome, they would prep themselves and they would have like these big, massive like get-togethers, if you know what I mean. And it would just be all the men, you know, and they would also like get completely nude and oil up and paint up and armor up, and it sounds like it was just a really hot time right before they went out on a huge battle, which also feels confusing and icky. And you know what else feels confusing and icky is this little... That's too much extra. Well, I'm not going out to fight a literal battle, but I am here trying to engage in what I believe is a war. Can you see? Is this the fit? I love a skirt nowadays. Oh, you can't see my whole body. Let's get back on the chair. Maybe I should like... Is that hot? This is such a weird way to sit in a chair. I don't know, it's working for me. Oh, I was totally out of frame. Is this, what is this? Trying to feel good despite the fear. Trying to feel good despite the fear. So, to recap, if you're still here, I really truly do love you. Thank you for coming on this journey with me. My name is Max Bruns, and this is the unrandom state of altruism. The unrandom state of altruism is the new USA. We are going to employ ourselves for conscious communities of care through education so that we know what is real. We can mobilize ourselves to make a real difference and real change in our local communities. We're going to do all of this because we want to resist the tide of fascism, which seeks to control every facet of your life, including your thoughts. We're not going to let it happen. We are not going to let it happen. We're going to do weird shit like paint our eyes and get all dressed up and go out and say our thoughts and make people listen. This experiment that I'm embarking upon, like I said, is called the unrandom state of altruism. It's the new USA, one guided by the motivation of conscious and empathetic communities of care, one which will stop at nothing to resist the tidal wave of fascist oppression, the tsunami that threatens to overtake us and flood the plains of our daily lives. But we are girded by truth, by the community of one another, and the spirit of our resistance shall spread across the country, bobbing amongst the wreckage on the surface of the floodwaters, where we shall gather and build boats and floating cities. We are going to survive this. We're going to come together as stronger communities, despite the fact that fascism seeks to oppress and overtake us. We're not going to let it happen. Feel good, look good, fight oppression. Fuck fascism. This is resistance. This is what resistance looks like. I brought up earlier in the video too that I wanted to mention some places in Cincinnati, if you're a Cincinnati resident, that you can volunteer at. For homeless shelters, we've got the Bethany House. We've got the Shelter House, the Barron Center, and the Bethany House. If you're really interested in like eco and sustainability initiatives, Urban Farming Initiative Cincinnati is really good. And you can always volunteer at the Free Store Food Bank. If you're into the education side of things, Crayons to Computers is a really good place. I will link all of those in their various ways that you can contact them in the information of this video. Part of what I read today is from an essay that I'm going to publish on Substack under the same name, The Unrandom State of Altruism. And I'm going to link some other pages that I'm working on right now in the bio of this video. I'm not doing the whole like subscribe thing, whatever, but I'm here for the journey and you can follow me along wherever you want. Have a great day. I love you. Fuck fascism.